I always tell people I either had a full-blown, real episode of lost time or a mini stroke when I was 15. I don't know which one it was, but it still freaks me out. In 2005, I was 15 and lived in Frederick, Maryland. We had 5 acres, and about an acre of it was lawn because we had a huge backyard. Back then, it was my job to mow during the summer when I was out of school. My dad had a John Deere riding mower, so it wasn't that bad, and I would usually just listen to music while I got it done. This happened on a Saturday, which I remember really well because I had stayed the night at a friend's house after band practice and barely got any sleep. I was tired and I didn't want to do anything that day, but I went out anyway to avoid one of my dad's lectures on showing up and being responsible. Looking back, I'm sure I was such a joy to be around when I was a teenager. Anyway, it was late morning when I went outside. I remember grabbing my iPod and headphones and going to the shed to get the mower out. Right next to our shed, on the edge of our yard, we had a wooden picnic table that had been there forever. I sat down on it for just a second to psych myself up and choose the first song. Then, like the lazy 15-year-old I was, I leaned back on it and laid down on the top of the table just watching the sky. It had been a partly cloudy day with big, slow-moving clouds. I wasn't paying too much attention to anything when I first laid down, and I was more focused on my iPod, but after about a minute of staring up, it looked like one of the clouds had something inside of it. At first glance, it just looked like a shadow, but as I focused on it, I could swear there was an actual shape inside the cloud. The best way I can describe it is it looked like there was a slightly darker cloud floating in the middle of a larger white cloud. The more I looked at it, the more it didn't look natural. After staring at the thing, I started to wonder if I was hallucinating because I could see little streams or jets puffing out water vapor from the edges of the smaller object inside, like it was actively creating more cloud around itself as it was moving. I know that sounds like I was on something, but I hadn't even tried any drugs yet at that age other than cigarettes and cheap beer, both of which I thought were nasty. Right when I knew I was actually seeing these jets, I sat up and suddenly felt extremely heavy and tired, like the kind of tired where you can't even keep your head up. I laid back down on the table with an overwhelming urge to close my eyes, and then I was out cold. The next thing I knew, my mom was standing on the side of the table saying my name and asking me what I wanted on my sandwich. I jumped up off the table thinking I'd fallen asleep without even starting the yard and told her I'd be in as soon as I finished mowing. She asked me what else I needed to do and mentioned something about me putting the mower away already. At this point, I was looking around and noticing that the entire lawn was already mowed and I could see that the shed doors were closed. I really had no idea what was going on. I was completely honest and told my mom I hadn't mowed anything yet and that I had laid down on the table and fallen asleep. The only thing she said to me was that I needed to get more sleep after band practice and didn't take anything I was telling her seriously. She just brushed it off like I was joking and went back in the house. I sat there on the table forever trying to figure out what happened. When I finally went in, I realized I had been asleep for over an hour and had zero memory of mowing anything. I didn't even remember getting off the table. Another weird thing is that the yard wasn't just mowed, it was mowed the way I usually did it, where I would go around the perimeter at the end to give it a nice border. The whole thing was extremely confusing. While my mom was making lunch, I had to ask about it a second time, and again, I was totally honest with her. She told me she had watched me mow it while she was in the kitchen and acted like I was trying to prank her or something. She said the only reason she came out was because she watched me put the mower away and lay down on the picnic table and thought I might want something to eat. I quit talking about it after that, but I can tell you this. When you do an hour of work without a single memory of it, it messes with your head. My mom clearly didn't believe a word I was saying either, which made it even more frustrating. This is an experience that I have carried around for a long time. If it had just been me mowing in my sleep, that would be crazy enough, but I am 1000% sure I was wide awake when I watched the double cloud above me, and there is no way I just passed out and mowed the lawn in my sleep. It's almost comical to say that's what happened. A full hour of my life just vanished, and I have no idea how it happened or why. I wanted to share my story because I know there are other people out there with similar experiences, and I think the more we can openly talk about unexplained things like this, the closer we'll get to figuring out what's really going on. When I was a kid, between about 8 and 12 years old, I had what I thought were recurring dreams. I used to sleep on the top bunk in a room I shared with my older brother Justin. From the top bunk, I had a view of our backyard, and I could see pretty far across our neighbor's land behind us since our room was on the second floor. The dreams always started with me lying in my bed at night, looking out the window like I usually did to fall asleep, and I would see this thing floating in the distance. It was shaped like an egg and dark, and it would slowly come toward our house until I couldn't see it anymore, but I always somehow knew it was hovering directly above the roof. As soon as I would lose sight of it, two beings would come into my room. As a kid, I called them ghosts because they looked similar to people, but I remember them being very thin with light skin and dark eyes. They would also come through the window, like through the actual glass as if it wasn't even there. When they came in, they would talk to me, but not out loud or in the normal sense. I just knew what they were saying in my head. None of this ever scared me, and I would just lay there on my side looking at them and quietly answering their questions. I don't remember exactly what they would ask me, but I remember always answering. Over the 4 years this was happening, there were 3 separate times that I went somewhere with them. All 3 times it was the same place, which was a circular room, and it always reminded me of what the inside of a soup can looks like, but bigger. I wasn't forced, but strongly encouraged to stand on a small platform in this room and answer more questions. I never saw who I was talking to, but I could feel that something else was there. Again, none of this was threatening, and I don't ever remember feeling scared or in danger, but it did feel important, like what I said mattered. As soon as I had my 12th birthday, everything completely stopped, and I never had another dream or experience. Weirdly, I didn't even think much about it after it stopped. I just grew up and forgot about it, and I am now 42 years old. Moving forward in time, last year my mom was diagnosed with dementia. She was still in the same house we grew up in, but had been there alone since my dad died in 2022. With her disease, taking care of the house and the property were getting to be too much for her, so Justin and I convinced her to rent out the house and move into an apartment in town where she still lives today. While we were helping her transition into the apartment, Justin and I were moving a truck full of her stuff into a storage unit, and I found a box filled with our old school stuff. This was art projects, Christmas ornaments we had made, awards, and things like that. I started going through it and found a manila envelope full of drawings I had made when I was in elementary school. There were dozens of pages, and every one of them was a different depiction of the dreams I was having back then. There were drawings of the egg-shaped object floating above our house and the 2 figures standing by the window, and a few of me standing on that platform in the round room. They were all signed by me in the bottom corner, which I'm glad I did because I honestly had no memory of drawing any of them. A day or 2 after I found them, I was going over to my mom's, and I guess I just wanted to know more, so I brought the envelope with me and asked her. Her memory comes and goes, but she tends to do much better with older memories, and she recognized the drawings as soon as I pulled them out. She said those years were kind of a big deal, and that she and my dad had been really worried about me. I guess she would find the drawings in my binder from school and up in my room, and I apparently talked about the dreams all the time back then. They had even planned on taking me to a doctor or a psychiatrist, but when I turned 12, it stopped, so they never did anything about it. Then she told me an additional side story that I had never heard before and knew nothing about. During that same summer when I turned 12, we had a family reunion at our house, which I absolutely remember because a cousin I didn't get to see much came. He lived in North Carolina, but we were only a few months apart in age, so I was always closer to him than any of my other cousins. At some point during the reunion, my aunt had taken a picture of my mom and dad standing with my brother and me on the side of the house. My mom said she loved it because we were all smiling, but when my aunt sent us a larger print of it, my mom noticed something in the picture behind us. What she initially thought was perfect timing on my aunt's part for catching a large bird coming down to land on top of a big tree behind us actually looked like a dark oval-shaped object in the sky when you looked at it closely. She told me it was always hard to tell exactly what it was because my aunt had used a semi-professional camera with a portrait lens, and the picture of us had shallow depth of field, which made everything behind us out of focus. My mom never jumped to any conclusions, but she did say it was an unsettling coincidence since I had been having dreams about that exact object over our house. She said she never framed the photo or put it out, so it kind of floated around our house as a loose print for decades. It wasn't in the box that we found, and I wasn't able to find it in any of the other stuff we moved into storage, so I'm guessing it got lost somewhere over the years. The conversation I had with her about the family photo, on top of finding my old drawings, has really consumed me. I've been trying really hard to remember more from that time, and I hope I can find the family photo because I feel like I need to see it now. I also had no idea my parents were going to take me to see someone for what I thought was no big deal. I never thought it was anything anyone cared about back then. I don't know what was actually happening to me, but I would be lying if I said I don't look at the dreams differently now. The fact that I documented everything as a kid without even remembering doing it is just crazy to me, and it tells me that what I went through meant a lot more to me at the time than I remember. I had what I can only categorize as a memory recall. That's my fancy way of saying something caused me to remember an event that happened a long time ago that I had completely forgotten about. This memory recall came out of nowhere when I was at a restaurant, and it was triggered by a little girl having a meltdown at the table across from me. It wasn't just from her crying, because I've heard kids crying 1,000 times. It was the specific pitch and tone of her voice that really caused it to happen. Something about the sound of it reached into the back of my mind and pulled this entire experience out. This memory was about something that happened to me when I was young and still in primary school. It was 1979, and we lived in Perth in Western Australia. My mom was in the hospital giving birth to my younger sister, which my dad hadn't been able to make it to because he was stationed offshore somewhere working in the oil and gas industry. While my mom was in the hospital, I stayed with a family friend who, for privacy's sake, I'll call Mary. Mary had 3 children of her own that I was with, but I was the youngest by a few years. That day, though, it was just me and Mary's 2 youngest kids, Mark and Abigail. Mary lived very close to Cottesloe Beach, and I remembered her kids nagging her about going to the beach by ourselves. This would be almost unthinkable now, but wasn't unusual in the 70s. Kids had a lot of freedom then. Mary must have said yes, because I remember following her kids across the street and down into the sand dunes below some hotels and beachfront homes. Mark and Abigail were ahead of me, almost running, and I was behind them just trying to keep up. As soon as we got down the hill and on the beach, we saw a very oddly shaped object sitting at the base of the dunes. This object seemed huge to me then, but in reality, it was most likely only a couple of meters tall. Abigail thought it was some kind of amusement ride like the ones you can sit inside and they spin around, and I guess that was the closest thing our minds could relate it to, but we all walked right up to it. This is where the memories get very weird, so bear with me. I remember a small figure that looked like a fairy to me step out of whatever this thing was, and it was wearing some kind of full-body outfit. I don't remember the details exactly, but I do remember him talking to us in an extremely soothing and calm way and telling us not to be afraid as he motioned for us to come in. All 3 of us then walked up a few small steps and went inside. As soon as we were in, we were separated. I watched Abigail go into one room, Mark into another, and then I was brought into a smaller room. The only thing I remember about my room was that it was pink and there was a table in it. We had only been in these rooms for a second when I heard Abigail screaming. Her scream sounded like pure terror to me, and it's why the kids screaming at the restaurant had essentially jolted or shocked my brain into remembering. Hearing her scream really scared me, but the small figure who was in the room with me put his hand on my arm, and that made me feel very calm. The last thing I remember was lying down on the table and feeling a moment of pressure in my left arm. I asked what they were doing and got one simple answer. I was told that they were doing this so it didn't happen again when I was older. That was all I got. I don't have any memory of leaving the room or the beach or even walking back to Mary's house. I also don't have any memory of telling their mom or my parents or even talking about it. The only thing I have left after being in the pink room is getting picked up and meeting my baby sister, but I've always remembered that. I know this is a wild claim, but when it hit me at the restaurant, I couldn't believe I had forgotten about it. I don't know what any of this means, and I really have no idea what we saw on the beach that day, but something very weird happened to us, and I guarantee I'm not confusing it with a dream or some kind of other childhood make-believe. Something extremely abnormal was on that beach. I never stayed in contact with Mary or her kids as I grew up, so I have no idea where they are or what they're doing. But I would really like to talk to Mark or Abigail about what happened to see if and what they remember. I've searched for Mark on social media, even though I don't really know what he looks like now, but I haven't found anyone I think could be him. Maybe someday I'll be able to get a hold of one of them and get a better idea of what actually happened to us on the beach that day.